Hello. I'm a 22-year-old woman and the legal owner of the house I grew up in. I inherited it from my mother when she passed away last year at the age of 47 due to a sudden stroke. It was a shock, but I've made my peace with it. My parents divorced when I was 7, and they had joint custody, so I spent half the month with my dad and the other half with my mom. I was a lot closer to my mom because she really understood me. My dad, Mike, who is 50, was always busy with either work or women, and I felt like I never had his full attention. It was tough, but I was okay with it as long as I had mom. After I turned 18 and started college, Dad moved to Houston for work, so we started seeing each other less. We'd only meet around the holidays. 2 years ago, he brought his girlfriend Julia, who was 38, to celebrate Christmas with us. She had 2 daughters, 18-year-old Lisa and 16-year-old Emma, from a previous relationship. They'd never been married, but they'd broken up about 7 years before she started seeing my dad. It was a surprise because Dad had never brought any girlfriends to family dinners before. But we welcomed Julia and her kids warmly and tried to make them comfortable. We all got along well at the time. After my mom passed, I found out she had left the house to me. My mom had divided her assets in her will around my 18th birthday because she liked to plan ahead, even for morbid situations. Since I had just graduated, I decided to move in and find a job that wouldn't require me to move out anytime soon. I wanted to stay in my childhood home because it was my place of comfort. Dad wasn't too happy about Mom's decision, and he made sure I knew it. He and Julia had been sweet and supportive around the time of the funeral, but Dad was a bit upset when he realized he wasn't getting the house back. This house was the one my parents had bought together when they first got married, but Mom took it during the divorce. It was fair because Dad got out of paying alimony, even though Mom had given up her career to stay home and raise me, so Dad could focus on his job. I believed Mom taking the house and the settlement and letting Dad go without alimony was fair. She worked her way up afterward, with a little help from her parents, and made sure I never felt sidelined. She did both jobs well, and I didn't think it was fair for Dad to be annoyed that he didn't get the house back. He didn't talk about it much, but I could tell from his behavior that he wasn't pleased. I didn't care at the time because I was still grieving my mother, and Dad being annoyed at her will was the least of my worries. She'd left all her wedding jewelry to him and all the gifts he'd given her, so that should have been enough for him. He went back to Houston with Julia a few weeks after the funeral, and since then, I've been living on my own. About 6 months ago, Dad told me he was now engaged to Julia and wanted to get married where his home was. He planned to come back here for the weeks leading up to the wedding. Since staying in a hotel with enough spare rooms didn't make sense, I agreed to let them all move into my house and stay with me before the wedding. I was tired of living on my own, and I got along well with Julia, so I didn't see anything wrong with letting them live with me. Dad also promised to split all the bills with me while they were here, so I didn't worry about overspending. They moved in about a month ago and have been staying here since then. It was nice having them around, and I felt a lot less lonely. However, 2 weeks ago, 3 days before the wedding, Dad sat me down and asked if I'd be willing to let them all move back here permanently. I didn't see that coming at all. He explained that he wanted to make me feel more comfortable with the idea of being part of a family and living with them. He didn't like the idea of me living alone in this house and planned to ease me into it. Now that he felt I was getting along well, he wanted to know if I'd be willing to turn this into a permanent arrangement. I wanted to say yes immediately, but his behavior when he learned he wasn't getting the house back threw me off. As much as I would have loved to make it permanent, I didn't think it was a good idea so soon, and I didn't want to act on my emotions. I knew that this was the only logical solution to my feelings of loneliness, but that didn't mean I had to let them all move in here with me. It had just been a month since they moved in, so I told him I needed some time to think. It was a gut feeling, but I knew it was in my best interest to give this some time and not make a rash decision. I kept my feelings aside and told him I'd inform him about my decision after the wedding. He looked annoyed but didn't push it. 10 days ago they got married, and we had a blast at their wedding. They were supposed to stay here for a couple more days after the wedding and then move back. I was preparing to tell them my decision, which was a yes, but before I could do that, they all took off on their honeymoon without even telling me. 2 days after the wedding, I woke up to find myself completely alone. They'd all left, but a lot of their belongings were still in my house. I made some calls, but nobody responded for a while, and I started to panic. I'd planned to tell them my decision that day, but I couldn't even reach them for hours. Finally, around noon, Julia got back to me and casually informed me that they'd left for their honeymoon and wouldn't be back for a week. I was stunned because I'd expected them to at least tell me about their plans before leaving. I was offended that they didn't ask me, but I didn't want to be petty. I started by asking her why nobody had told me about this, and she gave me a lame excuse saying they'd forgotten. She told me not to worry because they'd be back soon. I tried to explain that my problem was that they left without a word or even a goodbye, which was rude. I asked to speak to my dad, but her tone changed. She said Dad was busy and didn't have time to speak to me. I kept my cool and told her to let me know when he had time so I could get in touch with him directly. Suddenly, she turned on me, going from sweet to snarky and mean. She told me Dad would be busy for the next few days and asked me not to bother them. She even said there was no need for me to act hysterical, just because I'd been left behind. She reminded me I wasn't a child anymore, and Dad had a new family now, so I needed to make peace with it. By the time they came back, she wanted me to get over myself and clean the house for them. I didn't know who she thought she was talking to, but she sure as hell wasn't going to talk to me like that. She hung up right after saying that, and my anger was through the roof. I decided not to call Dad after that and thanked the universe for not letting me agree to his suggestion before seeing this side of his new wife. There was no way they were living with me anymore. I packed all their belongings haphazardly into cardboard boxes and left them in the yard for them to find when they came back. I didn't care what became of those things because they didn't belong to me or inside my house. After that, it was life as usual for me. I tried not to think about the betrayal I felt because of what Dad had done. Yesterday, they finally came back from their honeymoon, and luckily I was at work when they found their stuff in the yard. I'd also changed the locks on the door so they couldn't get in. Dad was extremely pissed when he contacted me. He told me I was being a brat and overreacting because to them, deserting me at home without notice wasn't something worth getting mad over. They did nothing wrong. I just told them to take their boxes and leave, and if I saw them on my property when I came home, I'd call the police. He cussed at me and hung up, but I had to get back to work and couldn't waste time worrying about that. When I got home after work, I noticed they'd taken their things and left. I thought that was the end of it, but the most annoying part was yet to come. Around midnight, Dad called me and told me Julia had something to say. She apologized for the way she spoke to me and said she wanted to make amends. She didn't want to be on bad terms with me over something so petty. I told her to shut up and leave me alone because I didn't need her fake apologies. I could tell why she suddenly wanted to play happy family now that I wasn't letting them live with me. If she had any regrets, she wouldn't have waited so long to apologize. I was sure Dad wasn't sorry either, but when he realized I wasn't forgiving them, he got all sentimental and told me I was being heartless for not allowing them to live with me. He said he was willing to split all the bills if I let them move back in because the house reminded him of Mom. He accused me of being selfish and said my mother would hate this side of me. Am I the bad person for not letting Dad and his new family move back in after his new wife was rude to me and they didn't ask me to join their honeymoon? Update 1. A while back, I made a post on social media about the big decision of whether or not to let Dad move back in. People had a lot to say in the comments, and some were pretty sharp with their words. It was overwhelming, but I got the gist of what everyone was saying. Even though some comments were blunt, they made me think hard about what I should do. I stuck to my original plan and didn't let Dad move in. The truth is, he hasn't earned the right to come back. He's been awful to me, and the last thing I need is more drama. I told Dad I needed more time to think things over, and that wasn't what he wanted to hear. Almost immediately, they showed their true colors. They thought they could push me into making a decision by intimidating me, but I'm not someone who gives in easily. I've learned it's better to be alone than surrounded by the wrong people. In hindsight, I shouldn't have let them step foot in my place. When Dad found out the house was legally mine, his reaction was a red flag. He showed how materialistic and selfish he could be. Julia picked a fight with me, which only made things worse for her. If she hadn't started that argument, things might have turned out differently, and we could have been a happy family. But that's just a fantasy now because I'll never fall for their fake niceness again. The loneliness has been hard. Mom's gone, and all my grandparents have passed away, so I was desperate for family connection. But it's clear now that Dad and Julia aren't the right people to provide the support I need. I'm relieved I figured this out before it was too late. It's been a few days since they left, but Dad hasn't stopped trying to get in touch. He calls and texts nonstop, saying I should give them one last chance to make things right. But they don't deserve it. They've blown their chance, and they'd mess up another one, hurting me more. So no, it doesn't make sense to risk getting hurt again. I feel bad about treating Dad this way, but what choice do I have after everything that's happened? He hasn't made any real effort to be a good dad, so he has no right to complain or demand anything from me, especially not my trust or my home. It's tough to accept, but it's true. What you do in life comes back to you. Dad never invested in our relationship, and now he's feeling the consequences. He doesn't get to make life decisions for me based on his feelings because he never considered mine. Update 2. Dad has been pressing about needing to stay with me. At first, I thought he was just being insistent, but it turns out the situation is more serious. A few months back, right before his big wedding, Dad lost his job. He wasn't just taking a break, he'd been fired. Up until then, he'd been living off his savings, which seemed enough at first. But then came the wedding and a lavish honeymoon, which ate through his savings quickly. Now he's in a bind. After blowing through so much cash, he finally came clean to Julia, admitting they couldn't afford to move back to Houston and try their luck there again because he couldn't cover the rent. This was a huge blow because Julia had left her job to be a stay-at-home mom after meeting Dad, meaning she had no income to contribute. They needed a place to stay, and Dad just assumed they could crash with me. Julia, who was in the dark about their financial mess until recently, felt bad and apologized. That apology made me realize Julia's regrets were insincere. She was as fake as they come. Today, Dad got in touch, asking if they could move in for a few days until he found a decent job that paid enough for them to move out. I told him straight up, no way. They've been mean to me, and I don't need that negativity in my life. He's an adult and should have been more responsible. If you don't have a steady job, you shouldn't splurge on a high-end wedding and honeymoon. I get the urge to show off, but that's something you can only pull off if you have the financial backing, not when you have a family to support, including a wife who VDJ-TM's not working and 2 teenage stepdaughters. He knew his responsibilities but chose to ignore them, and that's not my fault. I refuse to feel guilty for putting my own well-being first. They can sort out their issues because none of this is my problem. I texted him back, trying to be polite, but as expected, he took my words the wrong way. He accused me of mocking his situation and warned I'd suffer for how I was treating him. I didn't know what to say, so I chose not to respond. At this point, whatever I say, he'll twist it and blame me, so it's better to stay silent and let him deal with his problems. It's hardly my responsibility to bail him out of the consequences of his actions. He's made his bed, and now he has to lie in it. It's tough, but I've got my own life to manage without getting dragged into his mess. Update 3. Dad decided to leave the city today, but not without letting me know what a huge letdown I am as a daughter. He could have left silently, but he and Julia chose to make a whole thing of it. I last spoke to him about 3 weeks ago, but we hadn't checked on each other since. Today, both he and Julia texted me, saying Julia's ex-boyfriend had decided to sponsor their trip back home and let them stay because he realized he needed to see his daughters too. Julia had full custody of her daughters, and her ex paid child support, but was always too busy to make time for his kids. He'd waited long enough for Julia and Dad to sort their situation, but when he realized they were useless, he offered to clean up their mess, which is great for his daughters, I guess. At least some dads step up, even if it's late. They didn't tell me all this, but I know this was the only explanation because they posted a picture of their daughters with a Lucky Charms caption and a 4-leaf clover sticker. I'm smart enough to know the real story behind Julia's ex's sudden epiphany and why he's funding their trip back home. Julia's manipulation and stubbornness might have had something to do with it. I don't know exactly what went down, but I'm just relieved they're leaving, and this is the last I have to see of them. I've also realized how easy I had it after reading some stories people shared about their crazy families. Rest assured, Dad is too worried about his reputation to harm me because he knows I won't hesitate to call the cops. Even if he does, I have enough training to defend myself, so there's no need to worry. Now that they're leaving, there's even less reason to think about them. I still feel lonely sometimes, but instead of moping, I go to my friends because that's a better route. I shut everyone out after Mom passed away and didn't realize how alone I'd become until I read the comments. It'll take a while, but I'm going to try to make the best of my life now because I have a stable job, a decent income, and my own house, which isn't something a lot of people my age have. I'm really grateful to Mom for it. I have great friends who care about me, and honestly, what more does a person need? If I get into trouble again, I'll just come back here, and I'm sure the wonderful people on social media will bail me out once again. Update 4. Life's taken a pretty sweet turn since my last update. After all the drama, my house and I have found our chill again. It's been a journey, but it feels good to have my space back. Since they left, I've been on a home makeover spree, hitting up home decor sales and Pinterest, turning each room into my oasis. It's been therapeutic, swapping old memories with new vibes, painting walls, and throwing out old furniture that didn't feel like me. Each room now pops with colors that make me smile, and I've got chill zones for reading, a great setup for work-from-home days, and even a little balcony garden. Work's been going great too. What started as a job to pay the bills is turning into a rewarding career path. I've taken on new projects that are both challenging and fulfilling, and my colleagues are like the family I chose. We've got each other's backs, and it's made all the difference. Work has become more than just a paycheck. It's where I feel valued. And guess what? There's a new guy in the picture. We started as work pals, sharing coffees and stresses, but it's turned into dinners and movie nights. He's been amazing through all the past drama, supportive and never pushy. We're keeping it light and fun, seeing where it goes, but it's nice to have someone who gets me and respects the life I've built. Dad and I aren't exactly chatting every day, but we've settled into a groove of checking in now and then. He's back in Houston, and we keep it light with holiday plans and updates. It's weird but peaceful knowing we're living our lives without the heavy stuff for a bit. Reflecting on everything, I've learned a lot about who I am and what I stand for. Setting boundaries has been a big one for me. I've gotten better at saying no and not feeling bad about it, and realizing it's okay to look out for me. The whole experience has shown me how strong I am, like my mom going through her own stuff back in the day. I've also gotten better at reaching out when I feel lonely. Instead of wallowing, I hit up friends, plan game nights, or just go out and do something fun. It's all about finding moments of joy, no matter how small. My house is feeling more like home every day. Each tweak and change makes it feel like my personal fortress of solitude. It's a great feeling knowing I have this place to myself, where I can just be me without any drama. Having the house to myself has been a blast. The freedom to dance in the living room at 2 a.m. or binge-watch TV without judgment is priceless. Hosting game nights and hangouts has been awesome, and it confirms I made the right call keeping this place for myself. So yeah, I'm taking life one day at a time, enjoying the calm after the storm. I've got my job, friends, a cool guy, and a home that feels like a hug at the end of the day. What more can a girl ask for, right? Thanks for sticking around for the saga. It's been a wild ride, but it looks like smooth sailing ahead. If anything crazy pops up, you'll be the first to know. Catch you later. Bye-bye.